Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Valerie Miner, Artist-in-Residence at the Clayman Institute, and I'm happy to see you all here today. Our Salon is an annual event celebrating how the arts contribute to the Institute's larger mission of gender equality and breaking barriers to women's advancement. Over the last 15 years, we first hosted a diverse group of Stanford faculty and staff artists, including taiko drummers, dancers, poets, filmmakers, musicians of other kinds, novelists, and singers. A few words about today's format. Terry Berlier will present for about 35 minutes. Then we will open the floor for questions. We really want this to be an exchange. However, please do not put your questions in the chat during the presentation because that can be really distracting to the presenter as well as to the audience. After the presentation, I'll read the questions and we'll see what Professor Berlier has to say. Before I introduce the guests, though, I would like to thank my colleagues at the Clayman Institute for their support for the arts these last 15 years. In particular, I thank the incomparable Natalie Mason for all her important work. Terry Berlier is an interdisciplinary artist who investigates the evolution of human interaction and queerness and ecologies. She has exhibited in solo and group shows all over the world in North America, Europe, Asia, South America, Australia. The places where she's exhibited include the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, the Contemporary Jewish Museum also in San Francisco, Contemporary Art and Spirits in Osaka, Japan, the San Jose Institute for Contemporary Arts, the Clarice at the University of Maryland, and the Stanford Art Gallery. She's received numerous residencies and grants, including the Center for Cultural Innovation Grant and the Arts Council Silicon Valley Artists Fellowship. Her work is in several collections, including the Clayman Institute, the University of Arizona Tucson, and the Progressive Corporation. She actually collaborates with a range of people, engineers, composers, musicians, architects, and natural scientists. Describing her art, Berlier says, "In my practice, I interweave movement and sound to investigate the evolution of human connections with queerness and ecologies. I excavate material objects to challenge our understanding of progress and reveal how history is constructed within a cultural framework. Orienting, disorienting, reorienting. My work provides tools to recover and reanimate our faltering connections with self, queerness, nature, and society, often through humor." So I look forward to her reanimating our faltering connections. And today, Professor Berlier will share recent art projects and provide an overview of her practice. Now, please join me in offering a warm welcome to Terry Berlier.
Thank you, Valerie. Let me just, oops, let me get. Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie, and thanks to the Clayman Institute. I'm excited to be here and to share my work. It's been, last time I did this salon, Valerie reminded me it was many years ago. So I'm gonna just jump right in and try to keep an eye on the time. And I also don't really mind if you do comments in the chat. I can't always keep up with them, but I can try. So I'm going to start with this piece. Thank you for the beautiful introduction, Valerie, summarizing kind of my work. So I consider myself an artist, but I primarily work in sculpture, and a lot of that sculpture is kinetic and sound based. And I thought I should start with this piece called Two Pantops Can Meet. It's from 2003, and it was my graduate thesis show. And I think for it highlights a lot of things that have threads that have continued in my work, and it also points back in time And from in this piece, after so I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio in a conservative Catholic Republican family and have spent most of my life trying to recover from that. And after I got out of undergrad in Ohio, I traveled around a little bit and I found myself joining the Peace Corps and I went to Jamaica. And while I was in Jamaica, I came across this homophobic saying that was that two pan lids can't meet, which I had no idea what this meant. And a community that family that I was very close to, translated it as two vaginas cannot come together. And so I thought it was hilarious at the time because I had I wasn't really sure how to respond. And so I could only sort of respond with humor and trying to blow it off. So that was like 1995 to 97. So years later, I started collecting. Some of my work deals with recycled or reclaimed objects, and even if I'm not using reclaimed materials, I'm really concerned about the environment and this climate catastrophe that we're in, what it means to be living in a extinction event. And so I found myself in thrift stores, and there's always this a box of mismatched pan lids there. So I started collecting these lids. I collected over 200 of these lids and made these what I call pan lid couples as a way to refute the original saying. And so as I was making that piece, and this was a sound piece, and there's a sound piece made out of the playing the pan lids, which I'll show you in a minute, and then also a recording playing with the saying that repeated over and over again. And so as I was making that larger installation, I started setting aside lids that resonated really strongly, and began a series called the Pan Lid Gamelan series, and I've made up to four or five of them by now. And this is one of the ways in which it's invited a lot of composers and percussionists to collaborate with me. And this is percussionist Chris Froh, who's based in Davis, who was playing the pan lids at an opening. And this is a piece from 2009, I think. It was one of the first bigger projects I did when I started teaching here at Stanford in 2007. And this is called Self-Leveler Tipping Point. And it's a kinetic sculpture that rocks back and forth. There's a cast aluminum axe that I made here that rocks back and forth. And I'm playing with this environmental phrase of the tipping point to create this uncomfortable situation where the sculpture rocks back and forth. And there's a video on both sides at the top here, and it's a horizon line of the water. And as the sculpture rocks back and forth, there's max MSP programming and a Wii Fit was used to make the water attempts to keep the water at level as the whole sculpture rocks back and forth. And then this is just a reference point to a sculptor that artist I've been influenced by, Felix Gonzalez Torres, which is called Untitled Perfect Lovers. And he made this piece when his partner was diagnosed with AIDS and was going to die, or they knew he would die eventually. And it was this idea that the couple would fall out of sync. And so this is the sculpture that he installs, and the clocks will eventually go out of sync. And this is the piece I made in 2011 called Perfect Lovers, where it's back to my interest in the environment and natural timekeepers. I was looking at tree rings and tree ring dating and how they were able to find fire burn histories and all sorts of climate markers, and this was a also kind of mimicking the clocks, thinking of the sculpture, the tree rings as clocks. So there's the this is like a 30-foot sculpture by 4 feet by 4 feet, and there's like 51 rings on each half. So there's like 102 rings that kind of reflect each other. Uh, and here's a couple of different angles for this piece. And this is Recology San Francisco, which is the AKA the San Francisco dump. And I had a 4-month residency there during my sabbatical in 2011-12. And this was one of the first pieces I made. So while you're in residency there, you make an exhibition at the end of the 4 months that, and all the material, all the artwork you make has to come from the dump. So the first piece I made there was this piece called Reclaim Time. So I was playing off the previous piece, Perfect Lovers, with making these tree rings. But you can, on this one, I'm using found woods and leaving the kind of varnish and the history of these different woods here all together. And then another piece I made there, which was an excuse to work with the concrete workers there, which were amazing, is not only does household and construction waste come there, but also cement trucks almost always over order their concrete, and so the leftover concrete has to go somewhere because nobody wants to have a mismatched concrete driveway. So I decided to work with the primary tool for collecting your items from the dump, which was the grocery cart. The studio was about a block away from the first picture I showed you, of where you can drive in and dump off your garbage. And so I wanted to use the grocery cart as a way to talk about the weight that, I mean, I think it was sort of the emotional and psychological weight I was feeling doing the artist residency at the dump, because it's really intense to see the amount of waste that comes through there. And also in a city like San Francisco, where there's some of the highest recycling rates, and so you think we're doing all good and we're all patting ourselves on the back, and still there's just completely brand new items that come through. And so I was thinking about the weight that this is having on us as a culture, the weight that that has on the individual, and how that kind of impacts us. And this piece is called Smart and Final, which sometimes I get lucky and the title is just built into the piece literally. Um, and this, I like this photograph of it on this background because it shows you how ecology kind of deals with the concrete and cement that comes in, and they just kind of continually, if there's something that they need to fix on the property, they will just pour a section there. They also pour the dividers, I forget what you call them, those dividers on the highway. They have molds for those, and so they'll use that leftover material there. This is another piece I did in residence there called the Acoustic Locator, which is based off of these World War II pre radar devices, which are basically just large horns that amplify the sound. And it was, for me, it was something that allowed me to, I didn't realize how well it would work, but if you've ever been to Recology, it's down there on Tunnel Avenue in South San Francisco, and it's a very industrial area, and the Caltrain stops there, so it's pretty loud. And the freeways, it's in between the Caltrain and the freeway, so it's a pretty noisy area. Also, all the garbage trucks are coming in and out. And I was able to, when I rolled it outside, I started hearing birds nesting in the roof and stuff, and things that I wasn't hearing before. And so I was quite surprised at how that worked. This was my studio when I was there. You can just see it's like a free for all. It's like I was like a kid in the candy store there, just collecting materials. And um, one of the things I was excited to get was hold of was this piano, and took apart. I thought I was going to go completely acoustic and not, or, not work with any electronics there, but I found a computer and I found many keyboards that come through and reprogrammed the keyboard to play the piano for the piece. And so I was taking this kind of solo instrument and making it into this instrument that could be played by many people at one time. One of the things I like about it is when people that do play piano try to attempt to play it, the keys are stretched out just enough that you can't really play it in the, if you're a virtuoso at it, like you can't really get a good roll. And so it sort of forces us to, forces everyone to be on a little bit of an equal playing ground in terms of how to play it and figuring out what kind of sounds you can get out of it. I'll just play a really brief clip so you can hear it. So that was like two people at the opening that didn't know each other and started playing together. You can see I've used this title repeatedly. This was a piece called Perfect Lovers for Seal and Sally, which was, Seal was my great aunt, and this was her life partner that she was always in the closet about. And what I found at the dump was this large glass wine bottle that somehow didn't break. And then I decided to use all the different woods that I found there that I turned on a lathe to mimic this, and I saved the sawdust. And my great aunt in her retirement was a woodworker. This piece is called This Side Up, Handle with Care, and at the time it was a half-size model of my actual house, or skeleton model, except that half of it was upside down and half of it is right side up. And instead of walls, there's piano strings that come down, and the audience was invited to play it, pluck it, play it with bows. And one surprise that I found, most of it is made from reclaimed Douglas fir, and it was really hard and dense wood. And it was old growth, so it's just like beautiful wood. It just resonated amazingly. So that's why you see people laying all over the sculpture. And then I was invited to exhibit it twice outdoors at two different venues, and it also surprised me again by the wind ended up playing the piece, and it became a aeolian harp. And so while I was installing it, I almost fell off the ladder because it started having this really high electronic hum. This is a piece called When Comes the Sun, which I made in 2012 when I was in residency in Norway. And it was the first time I was experiencing 24-hour sun, or almost 24-hour sun. So it's a solar powered sculpture that basically it's a circular guitar, and so depending on the sun it'll go faster or slower, and it plays Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. And this is bringing us up to a little bit more current time. So I've been working with these ideas from queer theorist Sarah Ahmed for a while now, and she references this idea of the desire line, which is a term used in landscape architect to describe these unofficial paths, the marks that are left on the ground that show the everyday comings and goings where people deviate from the paths they're supposed to follow. And she talks about these as queer lines, and sort of references this as when queer, trans, other veer from these normative paths that I really fell in love with this idea that the desire line is a way to talk about queerness. And I think it really resonated for me because it was something, I think growing up, that I just never really felt like I had fit in. And so this kind of idea of veering from this path, um, made a lot of sense to me. And so I've been working with that idea of the desire line. And at the same time, um, I was also looking at the Mobius strip and thinking that this was also a queer form. And the Mobius, deconstructs the binary because the inside becomes the outside and vice versa. And so I started this idea that taking, and I do a lot of woodworking, as you see in my work. And so I started taking these boards and laminating these lines into them, playing with different colors of woods. and and then my only sort of, you know, goal here is to, at some point, by cutting this and repeatedly biscuit joining it over and over like hundreds of times, my only goal is to make a flip, so to make the Mobius flip at some point. um, and it allows for a lot of, like, just even in the process, which I hadn't really intended, but it has a very desire line effect in that it, like, it allows me to, like, technically have a lot of play within some very limited parameters. um, and and so it also embraces, like, the failures that are happening along the way. So if I can't really make a wrong turn, is the way I'm thinking about it. And I'm interested in how this line is on this particular one. I decided, I think this was the later one, I was trying to keep it continuous, but on several of them, I'm trying to deliberately interrupt that path, and thinking about that interruption of that path are sort of like just life decisions that happen along the way, and how thinking about, in the moment, or the breakup, or the failure as some sort of loss or negative thing, but in fact thinking of that as actually the positive thing. And, like, that's the most important part of the path, is that deviation or that shift. And here's another quote from Sarah saying, "Queer is, after all, a spatial term which then gets translated into a sexual term." And at the same time, I'm printing photographs of different hikes I'm making. So these own paths I'm walking, and my own way of sort of grounding um, through life. And I'm turning these into pillows, and making these sort of soft landings for these Mobiuses to kind of rest upon. And yeah, there's this another quote is, "These are the lines of rebellion and resistance that gather over time to create new impressions on the skin surface or on the skin of the social." Um, and so so this ended up in the series called NonOrientatable, and they each have their own sort of subtitle, which is based on the pillow or location. Um, um, so they're kind of, I don't know, I think they hit this sweet spot for me in terms of, um, like, I'm mostly interested in the conceptual framework within them, but then I finally found this form that kind of really, like, allows me to dig into the labor of making these, that I just find so enjoyable, which is not always like that. So here on this one, you can see kind of the disruption that happens. And so I'm thinking of this as the desire line that's interrupted, and then you can see how the form twists here. And this is Kokodera is the moss temple in Kyoto, and this was one of the most beautiful places I've seen, and I was able to teach in the Stanford overseas program in 2018. So that's where that one comes from. This one's the abysmal plains. So these are Google imaging of the ocean floor. So thinking of that uh, um, as another sort of site, and yeah, so you can you can see like the repeated numbers of this one, I can't remember how many joints this one has, like, but hundreds. Um, this is the Salt Flats, which is over near Facebook, the Bedwell Salt Flats, and that's where that one comes from. Um, and then this one is some lichen, so also playing with scale. This is obviously quite enlarged, and obviously the ocean is quite shrunken. um, this off-center line reorientates us and is inherent to our being. It literally shifts our orientation by the way we move through the world. It shapes us. So this was 2020, right before the pandemic hit, over at the Stanford Gallery. And then this is these pieces back here in the corner, which are really quiet pieces, but some of my favorite. This was it also doesn't really look like anything, but here's a detail. It's called "I Would Not Change It," and it's I traced and embossed this unsigned coming out letter from my great aunt, which she wrote to me when she was 84, and she passed away 3 years later. And she didn't sign it. Instead, she wrote with a post-it note on the 4-page letter. She wrote, labeled it bio with a question mark, and it was so it's a really personal piece, but I also felt like one of the greatest possessions I own. And for me, it's like I was like, oh, okay, I'm really close to this person. We hang out all the time. I tell her everything about my life, and she was like, I don't know, she was just like a very charismatic, joyful, lived life to the fullest. Was a teacher, and then a principal, and then retired and had this farm property, and taught herself woodworking. And so not only did she, tell me that this, which I had assumed and sort of, but I just wanted to, before she passed away, I wanted to not just assume that Sally was her life partner, but that that she would actually have that conversation with me. And I did like all this like hours of video conversations with her, I think, as a way to record her and try to not lose her. But I was anyways, and so she ended up writing this letter to me, and not only did she talk about what was, her relationship with her partner Sally, but she also told me about all these other things that happened, and all the different lovers along the way that she had, and also the kind of harassment from the family of someone in her generation, kind of facing that, and the kind of continual abuse that kind of went on around that. And so as a way to kind of honor that, I thought that embossing this in this very quiet way, it sort of allowed the letter is readable, but it does take a great deal of work by the viewer to read that. But I think it also is sort of like, if you take the time to stay with it, you sort of you get the reward of that intimate personal connection with her. And this is these are some photographs I came across of myself as a kid, and I was kind of struck by, like, I kind of forgot how much I loved hats when I was growing up, and I was thinking about how confident and butch I looked in them, and not having any clue about my queerness yet, but I was at the same time embodying it. And I was thinking in the sort of Judith Butler sense that all gender is performance, and children are, it's acceptable to pretend that you're any sorts of characters, a sailor, a firefighter, um, and that there's never any, um, critique of that as being a deviant or anything. And so I was thinking, I just found these as like these my earliest memories or resonance with enacting a queer identity. And so I wanted to play with that in some way. And so I just and I all these for 20 years of making sculpture, I haven't really worked with ceramics. And so I decided, oh, I'm going to make these like ceramic hats from my childhood as these kind of earliest resonance with queerness. And so this one's called Butch Cowboy. This is Butch Sailor. And they're Butch Fedora and repairing Butch. This one cracked. I also wasn't so interested in the preciousness of the ceramics, also kind of inviting the failure within that. And then the other piece that was in that exhibition was called Waiting for the Other Shoe. And it's sort of, it's a very, this is another picture of it. It looks like not much is going on. There's about 20 shoes that hang and they rise and fall. And I was thinking, there's this common American saying, I'm sure many of you have heard, called waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it refers to this sense of impending doom. And I took that as a departure point. And I was playing with like the gestures between silence, waiting, and collapse. And they kind of, I think it sort of sums up a lot of what I do with the kinetic and sound works, is that I'm kind of really interested in that, like emoting these kind of human emotions that are often felt but not maybe seen by all, like microaggressions. And so in the choreographed of the piece, it's about a 15-20 minute sequence that's programmed where they rise and fall, and then there's sort of a culmination. But this illusion of progress that kind of lulls us into this complacency, and then thinking of the shoes droppings as this dissonance and like this call to action. And there's a variety of different shoes that are used from my family and from the thrift store, and they each kind of develop their own character through their color, their weight, and gravity. So when the high heels fall, they kind of fall really slow and they often land completely upright. And when the steel-toed boots fall, they're really loud. And but at the same time, they each kind of wake up and they continue this cycle of rising and falling. There's a quote that I really liked from Adrienne Rich, and it's, "Our country moving closer to its own truth and dread, its own way of making people disappear." So and when this was originally up in 2020, the exhibition closed 2 weeks early, of course, because the other shoe dropped, called the pandemic that we're living in right now. And it was actually left on somehow, because when I went in 6 months later, the shoes were still dropping. And so I'm also thinking about like, how does this connect to like global political and social instability, and thinking about shoes as a way to connect to like mass migration. I'm thinking about the environmental decline, this kind of persistent stripping away of human rights for BIPOC, queer, trans folks, which with COVID all became highlighted even more. I'll just play a little clip of this and check the time. So that's sort of how that's the end of the 20-minute cycle. Is there's this crescendo where they all kind of collapse together. It was kind of funny to me. It was the one time I've actually heard people like start clapping at an art exhibition, like for the artwork. So it's somehow the choreographed cycle of it sort of like brought something out of the audience that I hadn't really expected. A more recent piece that I just completed, or the first version of it, we were able to complete, was A Kind of Ache, which premiered at the Clarice at the University of Maryland, which was a collaboration with composer Sarah Hennes, a trans composer based in upstate New York, and the musicians called The Living Earth Show, which is a duo, a percussionist and guitarist. One's based in San Francisco, and I think the other one is based in Portland now. And this project, yeah, it began with 5 different sound sculptures that I conceived of and constructed, and the sort of the working the question that we had was like, what if we could reimagine a world that was designed from and for a queer identity, and thinking about like what would it feel like to be the majority. And we were all kind of connected with this fascination of what we term queer objects. So this brings us back to the beginning of my talk, where I was talking about the pan lid and embracing this pan lid, which came from this homophobic slur, and embracing that object and letting it resonate and speak back in a time when I wasn't able to speak out about it for fear of my life. And Sarah has worked for years with thrift, and I'm picking these pan lids up at the thrift stores. Meanwhile, and little did I know that Sarah was this composer and a percussionist working with bells and collecting all these small, 1 or 2 inch, 3 inch, I guess there's some larger ones, little bells, and had this, has a collection, I think, of like 70 to 100 of these. And like thinking of them as like, what were they made for? Why do they exist? And then why have they also been discarded? And we created this 65-minute multimedia installation and concert. So Sarah composed for my sculptures, as well as the vibraphone and a guitar, both an acoustic and electric guitar. And yeah, so the sounds kind of conceptually leak to this kind of interactive and participatory aspects of queerness, and thinking of it as a constant exchange and inseparable. And so this was like, I don't know, so trying to figure out some way of cultivating a queer space, a space that's healthy for everyone. So there's this large overhead wheel that kind of that rotates, and there's many chimes on it. There's also some of the pan lids that I work with that are on it. And so there's sort of like, there's I don't know, 2 or 3 sections, I would say, to the piece, and I'll just walk you through. So there's the large overhead piece that's called A Million Queer Pleas, and it's like plea with SE in parentheses. And then there's this, the vertical wheel, which is called Remaking the Wheel. And this was one of the first pieces I made thinking about the project, thinking about the collaboration, and started in the beginning of the collaboration. I sent some pan lids to Sarah in the mail, and Sarah sent me some of the bells that they've been working with. And so I just mounted them on this wheel, and I was interested in this kind of like lopsided wheel that would kind of like not really get a good spin going, and that would always kind of have this like kind of sagging, like you know, it wouldn't continue. It spins fairly well, but it also has this kind of, you can see from the off-centeredness that it like starts to do like a has a kind of a erratic rhythm to it. And then there's the smaller piece that rolls on the ground called the roly poly, and it has wooden balls inside of it that kind of jingle. And I think I think I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna just show that, and then there's, it's hard to see it because it's we worked with a lighting designer, but there are like a good amount of maybe 60 of these bells that are all on the floor, and throughout the performance at the end they move from sort of a chaotic position, scattered around all around the room, to this, they end up encircling the whole floor in this circle. And I think I'll end with just a clip. Can you still see my screen? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna just end with a clip of this. So I think I'll stop there. That's a little bit of a quieter sequence of it. Is sometimes when the overhead wheel is spinning, it gets, there's really loud moments. But I know the sound and video doesn't always carry so well on Zoom world that we're in. So the good news is we received another grant, and we're gonna at some point this year we're gonna be able to perform it here in California. So stay tuned, or check out my website, or send me an email if you want to be on my list, and I'd be happy to let you know. And the works that I showed that do have sound and kinetics that I did not play clips of, most of that is on my website. So feel free to check that out if there's something you wanted to see. But I'm gonna stop there and I'm gonna open it up for questions so we can have a conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Terry. Let us all thank her in our own way with our hands or our symbols or whatever. And your website is terryberlier.com. And the email is berlier@stanford.edu. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So everybody has been invited to be in contact. So we have a question from Shannon Grissom. I think you need to unmute, Shannon. Or
hey, it's great to see you again, Terry. I was your landlady for a few years, and I always wondered about seeing your work, and I'm just delighted to see it. It's brilliant, and I hope to see more of it. But I have a question about the first work you showed, which were the pans, and on each string, was there more than one pan or just one per string?
Oh yeah, so each of the pan lids were coupled, so they were all hanging on speaker wire, and then speakers were inside of them. So
Oh,
it was like I would figure out how they would fit together perfectly like this.
okay.
Yes, so I
Okay.
had I had boxes and boxes of
Yeah,
them.
I couldn't quite tell that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't show a detail because that's such an old piece.
I would love to see in person, any other work you have, because this was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
okay, other people can either raise your hand or just put your question in the chat. No question is too simple, and since it's Stanford, no question can be too complicated. So please let us know what you're thinking. I had a question while we're waiting for other people to warm up. As a writer, I find that there are surprises. You talked about a particular surprise that came with one of the earlier works that you showed. And I'm always delighted by those surprises, and I consider in the fact that I keep them in the final draft of the story or the novel. Part of it's an artistic choice, and I was curious about your relationship to surprises in your work.
Yeah, I mean, I love the surprise. I think for me, I think it's about making and having, I have concepts and I have something that's motivating me to get started. But I think, and it's something I really talk to students about a lot, is to just get going on that, because you have no idea like the kind of like happy accidents or surprises or like wonderful deviations that are going to happen as you begin to make. And yeah, I mean sometimes they don't go the way you want, and maybe are, it requires more experimentation. But I can't remember which. Oh yeah, like when I put the large house piece outdoor, the wind started playing it like the Aeolian harp, and yeah, I could be like, yeah, I planned that, but I did not plan that. And but then, like it, once I had it outdoors once, then another venue wanted to exhibit it outdoors again, and I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. Like it does that thing. And sometimes, I didn't really follow that thread of like working with the wind, but sometimes it does kind of redirect you in that way. And I think that's also how I'm thinking about the desire line. Like these paths that you take are like that accident or the surprise in the writing or the making or the music or the the sculpting or the painting or whatever you're doing. And I think artists get a pivot like that, maybe in the way that scientists don't always get to do. I think they're doing a lot of experimentation in the same way. So I just love that. And that's one of the things I love about collaboration and working with other artists or folks that are not in my field. And that's why I've been working with a lot of different composers. And it kind of allows this other, it's partly it gets me out of my own brain. Like I'm tired of hearing myself think. But then it's like it's a conversation, and I think you make something that's beyond what the you know, the two of you do, or three of you or whatever do individually. And yeah, I'm excited by that kind of unknown area. Like if I knew how to make something, I probably wouldn't be that excited about making it. There's never sort of I'm sure you know that, like there's never a shortage of like books you want to write, Valerie, but you just like the ones that kind of perk to the top, or maybe the ones that are like a little bit more complicated, or, you know, that for me, it has to be some sort of learning that's happening in the process. Yeah. So I love the accident, and then sometimes it's, you know, I tell students, like sometimes it's better than what you were originally thinking. And like you just follow that thread. I don't, you know, but I think it also is, you know, it takes a certain type of person, I think, to be able to listen to that intuition, or to see that what is happening there, or to hear, I guess, or whatever your medium is, like, you know, to see like, oh, that's working. It's not, maybe it's not what was my intention, but it got me here. And so I think I'm realizing that that's sort of the vein that I work in. So as long as I can get myself started, there's usually some thread to follow.
Great. I see we have other hands up. I do want to say, if you prefer to ask your question in the chat, you're welcome to do that. I didn't mean to scare people off. It was just during the presentation. We didn't want you to disturb the presentation. So composer Patricia Alessandrini has a question. I think you're muted, Patricia.
Okay, sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute myself at first. Terry, of course, it's always such a pleasure to see your work. And I'm sorry, I only discovered it since I'm new here. I only discovered it once the pandemic had started. So I haven't seen things in person, and I would love to see some of these sound making machines in person. And I had a question because I work with musical automata as well. And I was wondering for you, because I've been thinking more lately about the meanings of working in these ways. And of course, your pieces have particular meanings, obviously, but in general, sorry, there's a very general question, but what does it mean for you, this kind of intervention? Right? Like you were talking about the piano and how it gives us a different physical feeling vis-a-vis the piano, right? That you don't bring your traditional skills to it. With other instruments, we see that they can do things automatically, or even just it's the wind. So what's the meaning? What's the kind of like human in the loop kind of situation? Like what is the place of the human, and how does it kind of change that relationship with sound making for you?
Well, that's a good one, Patricia. I think, I mean, I think it's different in every piece. And I think like the piano piece, I'm thinking very literally, like how do you disrupt these like sort of like this instrument that you can, and also like it kind of eliminates you being able to be like a virtuoso at these things, because I try to level the playing field. So I've, you know, I don't know, I've always had this like, you know, like equity thing. And so I think that's playing into it. I mean, I think like the rocking piece from from Tipping Point, from that sculpture, one of the first pieces I showed, I was trying to literally make something that would make you uncomfortable. And it did fall over a couple times, you know, like it was not, which is not the, like, you know, optimal thing to say or to share, but like it did fall over, and you know the museum got really pissed at me. And and but I was trying, like I'm trying to push things to that point of like what does it take for people to wake up about whatever, like whether it's the environment or social justice or you know, like, and what is that feeling like? It's really like I don't know how people get through their days without thinking about living in an extinction event. So like so I'm always thinking about these things. And so you know, that kind of is trying to actually make the viewer uncomfortable. Like people would like always like that one they kind of go up to and they try to touch it and like stop it from shaking, you know. Um so and then I think there's other parts which I don't know how well I explained, but I'm thinking about like you know, for me the kinetics in this, like it's kind of funny now that I'm making sculptures that don't, some of the sculptures like the Mobius pieces, the non-orientatable series, they don't have the kinetics and the sound. But for me, the kinetic and the sound and the collaborating with musicians and composers has always been like this it's like some way of like animating, like it's like I'm wanting the, I think I'm trying to emote these feelings that are, you know, felt but they're never discussed, or like or you can't see them but we all know them, right? So I guess it's kind of this psychological thing that I'm trying to get across, and I think sometimes it comes across, sometimes it doesn't. I think the pan lid for me has become this queer object, but I don't, it's, you know, other than it, I mean, it's also being used in a way like it's queer in terms of sexual identity for me personally, but I think it's also just queer by you're taking this like household object that you play with as a kid maybe, or you like you put your little kids to play with it, so it's not like it's that unique as a percussion instrument, but to elevate it to the stage or a concert, I think then, and then using it in a way that's not been intended to use. Yeah, so I think it's, for me it's like the the humans are kind of always absent, but the whole, all the sculptures are kind of based around that. Like I don't, you know, it is all about humor, like it is all about like these kind of felt feelings, and I'm, you know, I don't, so I think sometimes it's clearer than other times, and maybe it's sometimes more abstract. But it, and I do it, like there are like a lot of you know, like the Jamaican saying, two pan lids can't meet, either sayings or like a text I'm reading, like the Sarah Ahmed has been such a big impact on me, or Jose Munoz Queer Utopia. So I think those are also kind of sparks that kind of get projects going. Um, I don't know if, yeah, so that's sort of a general answer, but yeah, you should come over to the studio sometime. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
So we have a question in the chat from Jesse Piggott, or Pickett. Thanks so much for sharing this amazing work, Terry. I would love to hear a little about how you build these collaborations. How do you identify the folks you want to work with, and how collaboration influences your creative process?
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I think it's always, yeah, each collaboration is a little different. When I was in grad school, though, I worked with Douglas Kahn, who's a big sound art theorist, and I guess did sound art prior to becoming more on the theory side and history side. And he was also working with a composer in who was getting, while I was getting my MFA, Luciano Quesa was getting his PhD, and so we met at like a party, and you know, as he was like giving us like free food as the you know, the like starving grad students leaving, and then that led to like years of collaboration. I don't think I didn't show that many pieces that I've done with Luciano, but like I invited him and other, like Chris Chafe here from Stanford played the house piece that I showed. So I invite different composers to kind of come in and do whatever they want, make their own compositions on the pieces. And then so sometimes I'm just reaching out and asking people, like I like their work or I want to do something. I know I have a couple of people out that we've said for years we want to do something, and we still haven't figured out what we would do. And then in the more recent piece, A Kind of Ache with Sarah Hennes and the Living Earth Show, that I had done a project with Luciano, who I mentioned, and the Living Earth Show. We did one or two projects together, and so, and I had never met Sarah Hennes, and So that was sort of like a blind date collaboration, and I've been on a few of those. This one turned out really well, but it also took a really long time to get started because we were having conversations pre-pandemic, and then and it was hard. Like we were all four of us were in different locations, and then the pandemic made it even harder because then we were never able to be in the same room. And I mean, I think Zoom is wonderful, but like I think I'm just like an in-person kind of person, and I needed to like yeah, I needed like some connection other than so basically Andy from the Living Earth show was like, come on, let's do another project, and do you know Sarah's work? And I was like, no, no, no. Like I mean I said I like the work, but I said no, I don't want to do the collaboration. And then he just keeps asking until you say yes. And then I realized it was, you know, I think it took me even the years of working on the collaboration, the conversations, the experiments over the time. And then that I realized, oh, it was actually this beautiful fit, but I probably would have never found it if it hadn't been suggested, you know? And so like who, you know, like I was like, oh my gosh, you work with bells, I work with pan lids, like, oh my God, can we? And then, but also it's like you're dealing with people and different personalities and different rhythms and different, so you might be like a perfect collaborator, but maybe you don't like, you know, you're not like perfect friends or something. And so I think it's, and then there was a collaboration, another collaboration I did, which was really difficult. And it's like, I never, like, I think I just said yes, thinking to take advantage of any opportunity that came up. And it was before I was like, oh yeah, I have to be much more discerning with with what I choose to take on. Because it does take a lot of time, I think, collaborations. And so I think there just has to be some, like, I have to kind of like the work on some level, and then there has to be kind of some spark of like what, I mean, I think when collaboration works at its best, it's when you like both like all parties involved, like you create this other thing that wouldn't exist, you know. It's like what the Adrienne Marie Brown says, like there's a conversation in the room that only the people in the room can have or something. And so I like thinking about that as a way of like what happens to collaboration. It's not like Terry's work or Sarah's work or the Living Earth show's work. It's like this other thing that comes out of that, which, you know, and it's like we were all totally, you know, like we were supposed to do it in December of 2020, and then we were able to do it luckily in December of 2021. But it was like all that waiting, we were like, what are we, like, is it worth it? And then it was like, we felt really good. And now we're excited to bring it back to the West Coast. What was the second half? How collaboration influences? Yeah, I mean, I think it just gets me out of my own head, and it like, but there's also this thing too where like I don't want to be like the set designer. Like sometimes people come in and they're like, "Oh, you make cool things. Will you?" You know, I'm like, "No, I don't. Like we're doing this together, or we're not doing like I don't." And also the A Kind of Ache was, I feel like, so successful too because we asked for a lighting designer, and we were very clear, like we want someone that can work really organically with us. And like so sometimes people think like because I do art then I can do all the visuals, like this, like some sort of set or lighting. And like I would have to say that our lighting designer was like amazing, and we were like, okay, like if we're gonna have to fly you out to California because you're so good, because like he added a whole new element to the piece and was able to like throw us up examples, and we would be like, yes, no, yes, no, like try more this, less that. And we were able to get to a really exciting place. Like for me, like you know, I was trying to make this huge piece that would kind of like contain the stage, this huge overhead wheel that was constantly being interacted with. And then when like we, you know, when we were doing some of the lighting, it was like when it has that real, that the last clip I showed where it starts to look like a clock spinning. Like these, and again is like sort of like, you know, like I was trying to make, you know, there was some visual elements I was working with in terms of that sculpture, but I didn't realize the lighting designer was gonna, like, that it was gonna turn into a clock in some ways, you know, but not too obvious, but sort, you know, subtly reference that. So so I think, yeah, it's just, I think it's a lot of fun. And but then I'll go, like, I'll have a collaboration and then I'll be like, okay, now I need to work alone in the studio for a while. And I, you know, I am lucky with the Stanford research funds to have assistants from time to time. And when there's definitely times where I love having assistants in the studio. I love, you know, giving them a task and like letting them run with it. And sometimes, you know, they'll bring in ideas that I wouldn't have thought of, or we'll just be having a conversation while we're working that like brings up something. And then there's times where I like don't want anyone in the studio and I kind of have to, like, I am an introvert, so it is kind of good for me to like go quiet and recharge. So I think I rambled on long enough, Jesse, but thanks for coming.
We have another question from Sofia Gonzalez Rodriguez. Do you see the pandemic altering the focus of your art moving forward?
That's a good question. There were definitely things that we were thinking about for this last collaboration, this performance piece, where I think we thought like there would be different, you know, bells or different sound devices that would be given to the audience and performed at some point. And then it definitely was like, at one point I was like, let's like pull out anything that is a kind of a variable that could be pandemic negative. And so I think there was like a, and I think it was also, I mean, I think it had something to do with the pandemic, but I think it also had something to do with like not, like having, like, there are some pieces where I have invite the audience to interact, but it's also like you don't want too many variables where you can't control it, like where you yeah, I just didn't want, we didn't want too many variables on that. So, and then moving forward, I'm not sure, I don't know so much. I mean, I just think there's like so much collective grief and trauma right now that I think that's going to have some impact on what I make and what everyone's making right now. But I don't really know what that is. Like I don't have the answer for that. But yeah, thank you for that.
Clearly, you don't have to have the answer to everything. So other questions, either put something in the chat or raise your hand. Because if you don't, I have another question. Going once.
Go for it.
Okay. So I wondered in the piece with Sarah, where she was moving the object around the circle. What was the, why did you not have that mechanized? Why did you have a human being part of the performance or the piece or whatever you'd call it?
That's great. Well, I'm gonna answer that question, but at first I'm gonna say, like, in the early iterations, when I was like, I want this really large wheel that kind of contains the performers on stage, and like creates an inside outside space on the stage. And we were working with the theater to negotiate what that would look like, or, you know, the technical things. And you know, they were saying like, do you want to have that mechanized? And I think initially, because I do kinetics, I said yes, like, yeah, let's have that like on a motor and it's spinning. And then when all of the when we were finally all able to be in the room together, all of us collaborators, Sarah and Andy and Travis, we were thinking about like how important it would be for the human to kind of be the activation of those. And so yeah, I think it just became, and I think it kind of ties into something that both Sarah and I do in our work, which is like we tease or play with the idea of failure a lot, like you know, and that maybe something could go wrong, like in spinning that thing, like it's huge, but it actually spins really easily, but it, you know, it gets kind of shaky, and there is like a lot of random human, you know, faultiness that can occur. So it's not like this kind of we didn't want this like standardized spin to that. And the same thing then kind of, I think, evolved with the rolling thing. And to be honest, I think we all work very intuitively, and so like we knew that the roly poly, the spinning kind of bingo device, we knew it was going to be in the piece, but we didn't realize it was going to, like, until we were in the stage and had all the sculptures in there and all the instruments in there, we didn't really realize that was going to, you know, kind of become like a focal point that was going to spin around that sculpture until spin around the other vertical wheel. And then it became this really beautiful play of Sarah and the wheel, like walking in these circles against each other, and it was like dependent on Sarah's, you know, touching it, and you know, and we you know, like we had to rehearse, like there's one day I think where we rehearsed the piece like 3 or 4 times, and so it was like, and Sarah's like always gets like, it's like, I think it's kind of exhausting. It's an exhausting you know, part of the performance to be doing that, to physically like be bending over. And then there's something I think in the, you know, there's a lot of pieces I've done. I don't know if it necessarily is in the work that I showed tonight, is that there is that kind of, you know, there's the first iteration of one of the pan-lid gamelons. It was hung really high so that for performers to play it, they had to jump. And so there's always this kind of like physical feat to it. And so I think that's what kind of taps into, I think I'm answering your question, Valerie. Like, I think there's this like, you know, like I think the sculptures invite performance, and you know, that performance invites like, that's also, if the performer is activating it, it's easier to control whether it's on or off, or like making it, if it's performing its sound or not. So I think I'll stop there. I feel like I'm kind of babbling a little.
That is a great answer. So I think we have time for one more question, and that's Susan Roberts Manganelli. And I don't see her, but she had her hand raised.
She's here. She's still here.
So Susan, do you just want to unmute? Yeah.
Okay. I thought that last piece was just insane. It was so great. Something I didn't quite understand though was, did the audience get to see it from the viewpoint of the video camera at the very end at all? Was that part of the performance, or is that part of the video of the performance?
That's a good question. So the performance was, the stage was in the center, and there was the audience was in the round, so it was on all 4 sides. There was one camera angle that when the crew we hired to document it, they put a camera up in the ceiling. So that was like that was not a view that the audience was seeing, but but because we were, you know, we're still in the pandemic, there was a live stream of the performance. And so there was a live audience, and then there were people at home watching it on Zoom. And so they kind of added this extra dimension to it that it was not how the audience was seeing it. And in the I think, I can't remember how many seats were in, I mean, there's like risers on each side, but it didn't go up as high as that camera. Yeah.
So do you see the video as a second or a second edition or a second iteration of it, or is that just a document?
I mean, I see it as documentation, and I think it'll help. I mean, I think with performance, it's different, and every venue is a little different, and so I think you work with that theater or that stage in a way that you know you can utilize it the best and utilize it best with your piece. So I do really love that angle now that I see it, but I do think it's just documentation. Like, I don't know how, I mean, I think it might be cool to have that angle, but I think then there would be all the stuff on the stage that you kind of miss. So I'm just going to say it was a really good professional video crew.
Well, I want to say I'd like to go on, but usually at the end of these things, we have people who are running for planes and trains and cars and so forth. And I think that's happening even though we're on Zoom. So I think we should thank you so much, although we'd like to stay with you. And I'd like to invite the audience to thank Terry Berlier with me. And remember, she has a website, terryberlier.com, and her email is berlier@stanford.edu. Thanks again to everyone who helped put this together, and especially thank you to Terry. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Valerie, and thanks everybody for coming.